very emotional Theresa May. Some have accused her of not being emotional enough. I don't know whether that was her downfall, but the question for you is, I suppose, does this confirm your belief, as the Brexit spokesman for the Lib Dems, that Brexit doesn't work?
Well, what it confirms is that whoever the Tories select as their candidates and the future Prime Minister, they're going to have a huge problem on their hands because the numbers game won't change. They got completely bogged down in trying to deliver Brexit. So whoever inherits this poison chalice is going to have exactly the same problems as the outgoing Prime Minister.
And does it strengthen your hand as a Remainer, I suppose, is the next question?
No, I'm not convinced it does, because it's very clear that the positioning that is going to go on by the different Conservative Party leadership candidates is very much about positioning in relation to their own party membership. It's not actually about positioning themselves in relation to the country. It's who can adopt the hardest line to attract the support of party members that they will need for the second round when the 20-plus candidates have been whittled down to 2. And therefore, I think we will hear lots of statements about the merits of no deal, notwithstanding what the Chancellor said about that a couple of days ago. So, no, I think we've got a battle royal ahead of us.
And what will the Lib Dems kind of be aiming for now? More likely a second referendum, which is less likely now, you'd have to say, if a Brexiteer Prime Minister comes into play? Or would you like to see a general election?
Well, a general election in terms of the numbers might not make any difference, although if the council election results are anything to go by and what we expect to be the European elections, we might quite look forward to that. But realistically, I think it's still the case for a second referendum is getting stronger, and it may be that even if the Conservatives select a hard Brexiter, that person may see still that the only way to unblock this gridlock, or to deal with this gridlock, is to link whatever deal they try to negotiate and manage to secure with the European Union, because I doubt it'll be the one that the Prime Minister negotiated, to link that to a referendum. And that's the way they can put together enough members of Parliament who support the Prime Minister's deal with enough members of Parliament who support a second referendum.
But we're stuck now, are we not, Tom, in this kind of maelstrom of, no real sort of appetite for any one particular thing. And I'm not sure that we'll ever move on from that now. Are we destined, for example, to have a lifetime of coalition government for the rest of time?
Well, if we're not careful, what we will have is the likelihood of no deal. Just looking at the numbers in terms of how many days are left in Parliament before we reach the 31st of October, there are roughly 51 sitting days left. We're about to have a Tory leadership contest in the middle of it. We end up with, at my reckoning, just 22 days left in which Parliament can come to an agreement before crashing out on the 31st of October. So that is what we're up against. The clock is ticking, and it's the rate at which it's ticking is increasing, getting faster and faster.
The clock is ticking, and Vince Cable supposedly is stepping down soon, isn't he? Why don't you just get him to resign at the same time, and we can all sort of start afresh when you come back from the spring bank holiday? Well,
there certainly will be a Liberal Democrat leadership contest as well. I imagine it'll be better-natured, and clearly couldn't have quite as many contenders in it as the Conservative one, for the lack of having quite as many MPs as the Conservative Party. But just on the klaxon thing, I think you should have a klaxon for when a Tory MP announces that they're a contender for the leadership, because you'd be ringing a klaxon for people resigning, and then shortly after ringing another klaxon just because that person's announced their leadership contest.
Well, I'm very keen to see how that's all going to go. I mean, I'm fascinated by Helen Grant resigning in order to work for Dominic Raab and his leadership campaign, even though he hasn't actually announced that he's doing one yet.
Well, I guess that they will all be jockeying for support. They've got a few days. I mean, the weekend, I guess the phones will be ringing hot from one Tory contender to another to see who's willing to back whom, or who's going to do a deal about what role they might have in a future Tory Tory government. So, there's going to be a lot of horse trading this weekend.
And while you may not have a vote as to who should become the next Prime Minister and the leader of the Conservative Party, who would be the best candidate from the Lib Dems' point of view?
Well, from the country's point of view, the best candidate is someone who's going to be willing to try to bring together a broader coalition than just the Conservative Party. Because if that is what the new leadership, the new leader of the Tory party does, they're likely to get stranded on the same rocks as the Prime Minister did.
Excellent stuff. Tom, thank you very much indeed. Tom Brake there, Lib Dems Brexit spokesman. Let's talk to Mark quickly, who's in East Sussex. Hello, Mark.
Good morning, Mike.
Morning.
How are you?
Very well indeed. How's it going? Very tumultuous day to come. So, stay tuned for the next instalment.
Yes, very much so.
What's your view on what's happened? And what's your view on Theresa May finally showing a bit of emotion? And who do you think should be next?
I think she should have gone when her first vote got kicked out. And I think she will be remembered for destroying the police, persecuting military veterans in Northern Ireland and not doing anything about it, and destroying democracy.
It's not a great legacy, is it?
No. And those crocodile tears at the end don't fool anybody. I don't believe she's a good actor, a very good actor.
Okay.
Anybody who has that much pressure on them, so many people telling you you're wrong, at some time a reasonable person would fall on their sword, but she decided to keep going. And I've been a Conservative voter all my life, and I won't vote for him ever again, ever. And
that is the big problem for them, I think. Mark, thanks very much indeed. It's true to say, Ross Kempsall is with me here, political editor here at Talk Radio. It's true to say that a lot of people will accuse Theresa May of being ludicrously and way over the top in terms of her stubborn attitude. And when you look back at her legacy when she was Home Secretary, some of the trouble she was getting in Prime Minister's questions the other day about Northern Ireland, her legacy isn't great.
So from the time as Home Secretary, of course, she oversaw the Immigration Act, she oversaw the creation of the so-called hostile environment, the Investigatory Powers Bill. All of these legacies were controversial. As Prime Minister, she pointed today, in fact, to what she wanted to define as her own legacy. She highlighted in her emotional resignation statement the idea of bringing to an end austerity, the idea that in protecting the environment, eliminating plastic waste, tackling climate change, improving air quality, the Prime Minister trying to define her legacy in domestic terms away from Brexit. She said the race disparity audit, gender pay reporting were some of her key achievements. She mentioned proper funding, she said, for mental health, the start of the NHS long-term plan, ending a postcode lottery for the survivors of domestic abuse. The reason all those examples are into the Prime Minister's statement is because she wants the first draft of history to be written with those in mind.
Thank you very much indeed, Ross. A couple of tweets for you. You can tweet us, of course, at TalkRadio, at IROMG. Dave says this: at last, Theresa May reveals a bold plan the country can unite behind. Her resignation. And Steve says, listening to the Tories this morning just shows a change of Prime Minister will not resolve anything now. They're all tainted by this mess, and as a lifelong Tory, I have changed my allegiance. The next Prime Minister has to get a majority, and that means a general election. We've got lots more to do. Alberto Costa coming up very shortly, Conservative MP for South Leicestershire. Ross Kempsall is here, though. Ross.
Just going to bring you a few bits of reaction coming in from across the top of the Tory party. In the last few moments, the Prime Minister's chief whip, Julian Smith, who will remain the chief whip while the Prime Minister is in Downing Street until the 7th of June. He says compromises facing all MPs on Brexit are now set in sharp relief. They should not be delayed and need to be addressed now in the best interests of the UK. So no hint on who he's backing. But and in fact, one of the fascinating elements is all of the top cabinet ministers, many of them want to have a go at the leadership. They're going to have to keep quiet, presumably until the 10th of June, until the Prime Minister has actually formally resigned. Now, Boris Johnson, words coming in from him. He says, a very dignified statement from Theresa May. Thank you for your stoical service to our country and the Conservative Party. It is now time to follow her urgings to come together and deliver Brexit. So magnanimous words from Boris Johnson and an attempt to, I think, portray himself as not being one of those to seem to wield the axe. That has been a key concern.
Well, he's already wielded it, hasn't he? I mean, that's why she's gone.
Well, Boris Johnson saying a dignified statement praising the Prime Minister for her stoical service to the country and the Conservative Party. More reaction coming in as we get it from those figures.
Of course, Ross, thank you very much indeed. This is the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. This is Talk Radio. Theresa May has announced that she will stand down as leader on June the 7th. That means she'll still be here when Donald Trump visits. That means she will still be around for the next 2 weeks in Downing Street. But what is the point? That's the question I want to know the answer to. 0344 499 1000. Let's talk to Alberto Costa, Conservative MP for South Leicestershire. Alberto, very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mike. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. Every time I'm on the radio show with you, something big is happening.
Well, do you know what they
say?
say? Alberto, they say it's better to be lucky than good. We were standing around at 9:30 this morning saying, just hold on till 10 o'clock, just bring it to our show. And she very much did that. And it's the first time, as I say, rather slightly tongue-in-cheek from a listener there on the Twitter, she's finally united the country by resigning.
Yes. Well, look, I don't think there was much surprise in the Prime Minister's statement today. I've loyally supported the Prime Minister. As you know, we've had these talks on your excellent show before, Mike. My position has been that she has tried very hard to reach a reasonable compromise. It's an imperfect deal. For those strong Leave voters, they were unhappy with it. With those strong Remain voters, they were unhappy with it. But actually, the bulk of the Conservative Party voted for it in the Parliamentary Party. I voted for it 3 times. And I think the difficulty is this: whoever now takes over the leadership of the Conservative Party must understand that the first duty now is to unite the country. And by uniting the country, I don't mean getting everybody onto the same page, but at least helping to explain what is in the best interests of the United Kingdom. Whilst we must respect the referendum result, we must do so in a way that does not cut our nose to spite our face. We must leave the European Union, to use Theresa's words, in a smooth and orderly manner. And that's what I'm going to be looking for in terms of the leadership candidates.
And those are great words, Alberto, and I'm sure that many of your fellow colleagues will be saying them. However, nothing's actually changed in terms of what we are presented with and the numbers that we have in Parliament and the arithmetic that people talk about all the time and the dissatisfaction with the current deal which supposedly has been handed to us by Brussels. So do we have to go back to Brussels and get a better deal?
Well, I think once we get the results of the European elections, and once we have a new leader in place, I think that will galvanise the parliamentary party and the party members. We will rally round whoever he or she is elected as the leader. And remember, it's very likely that on this occasion the leader will ultimately be elected by the members, those very people that have been unhappy with the way in which things have proceeded over the last 6 or so months. So why I would say this, the arithmetic of the House of Commons will only change, I think, not necessarily with a new deal, because that's not going to happen. The way I think the parliamentary arithmetic will change in the House of Commons is with the new leader genuinely and charismatically and reasonably stretching out the hands to the country and saying, look, whilst our previous leader talked about Brexit meaning Brexit and leave meaning leave and all this, these political slogans, the reality is this, that we must leave the European Union in a manner that both is palatable to Leave supporters as well as Remain supporters. Albeit that Leave won by a small majority, we must respect democracy, but do so in a calm and orderly manner. No new leader will take this country out without a legal arrangement with the EU, and no new leader will revoke Article 50. So the only way that Brexit is going to be delivered ultimately is by having a deal that is palatable to both sides.
Ross Kempsall, sitting here with me, political editor at Talk Radio, has said that this might bring us closer to a general election, Alberto. Would you fear that?
I never fear the British people. I've stood in 2 general elections. I increased my majority at the last election, and I worked very hard for the people of South Leicestershire along with a very good team. My message is this, that Parliament has the responsibility to deliver Brexit. Theresa was a very resilient politician. She's a very sincere person, but I think we would all agree that she didn't perhaps have the necessary or requisite charisma to encourage those individuals in my party, let alone those individuals across the floor who didn't support her deal, to support it. And I think whoever comes next will basically be bringing back a very similar deal, but I think they will package it and present it and encourage other MPs to vote for it by using their charisma.
And have you decided who you're going to back for leader?
I'm going to back the leader that fulfills the criteria I've just mentioned, Mike, and that ultimately unites the country.
So that'll be Michael Gove then?
I supported Michael Gove 3 years ago. I certainly thought then that he was the best person for the job. I think I've been proved right. And once he declares, and he's not officially declared, so I can't officially back someone that's not officially declared, but were he to declare, I think looking at the known potential leadership candidates right now, I think he would have a very good story to tell as to why he might be the best person to do that. But I'll be looking equally at the CVs and positions of the other candidates.
Quite right. Alberto, thank you very much, as ever. Alberto Costa there, Conservative MP for South Leicestershire. Let's talk to Peter Dowd, who's Labour MP for Bootle, to see what he makes of it all. Peter, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
A momentous day in politics, no matter which side of the aisle you sit on, Peter. Is this a good thing for you guys as Labour in opposition? Is there going to be a general election? And what do you think Theresa May will be remembered for?
Well, first and foremost, it's got to be about the country. I know that sounds hackneyed, but it's got to be about the country. It can't be about Labour, it can't be about the Tories. And the problem that we've had, 2 or 3 years in getting into the referendum, it was about the Tory party, and it's about time it was about the country. So that's why I support a general election. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that the Prime Minister talked earlier on about Sir Nicholas Winton, who told her, this humanitarian who told her that compromise wasn't a dirty word. Well, here we've had 3 years of complete and unadulterated lack of compromise and consensus from the Prime Minister. And that's why she's in the position that she's in. And as far as I'm concerned, what the Tories do as a party and who they pick is completely a matter for them. Frankly, whoever they choose is going to be a continuation of the disaster and the chaos that we've been brought to. The country's more divided now than it has been when she took over as Prime Minister.
I mean, there must be part of you, Peter, and part of the Labour Party that would have liked her to stay on. I know that would be very self-serving and it wouldn't have been perhaps in the interest of the country. But she was doing an awful lot of good for the Labour Party.
Well, I think it's a question of whether she was doing good for the country. That's the question. It's not whether it's good for the Labour Party or any other political party, including her own. It's about whether or not this is in the national interest. And the way she's handled it, it hasn't been in the national interest. And history will say that. I can say that before history's even written. That's what they will say about this Prime Minister. She was incapable of reaching out to anybody else other than a small group of people in her party, and that has been damaging and really regrettable.
Now, if the Tories don't want to have a general election, can you force them into it? And if so, how would you do that?
Well, I think that we've got to make the case for a general election. Look, we had a Tory party leader resigning, 3 years ago. She took over in 2017, effectively lost the majority, has made a mess of everything since. We've got to say a repeat of this is not acceptable. You're going to have to go to the country to get it cheap. If they believe, the Tories believe they can get a mandate from the country, have the courage of their convictions and go. She claimed that she wasn't going to have a general election last time. As soon as she thought she was going to win it, it suddenly changed all the, this, we don't want the instability of a general election. As soon as she thought she was going to win it, to get a bigger majority, she went for it. It's time for another general election. We've got to pursue that and persist with that.
And are you worried that Brexit as an issue has divided the country in such a way that it will also kind of divide and conquer, if you like, the two-party system that we currently have in Parliament?
Well, it's a big question. I mean, this is pretty unprecedented, isn't it? But what we've got to be able to do, so I don't know the answer to that question. Again, I referred to history before. Only history will tell. We'd already had a so-called decline in the two-party system for many, many years. The last election tended to reverse that. I think the Brexit situation has sort of put that, the multifaceted approach to party maybe back on the agenda. I don't know, but what I'm clear about, I know what my manifesto says, what my values say, and I'm more than happy to take that to the country, as are lots of my colleagues, to make the case for Labour's manifesto.
And while you say, it's a matter for them as far as who is the next leader of the Tory party, is there somebody that you might like not to see getting it, and on the basis that they would rebuild the Tories and re-strengthen the party?
Absolutely not. Look, as far as I'm concerned, they're all as bad as each other. They're all on that particular bad spectrum. So, it's asking me to pick. It's asking me to pick the impossible there, I'm afraid, Mike.
And just on
I don't have any of them.
On a personal level, without being personal, is Theresa May the worst Prime Minister we've had in modern times?
I think without a doubt, yes. I mean, to beat David Cameron is a pretty sort of poor record to have. And frankly, yes, she's divided the country where there could have been compromise and consensus. She just chucked it aside and then has the absolute gall and the brass neck to talk about consensus right on the day she resigns. So, yes, she has been the worst Prime Minister in modern times.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. Peter Dowd, Labour MP for Bootle, very firmly saying that Theresa May has been definitely the worst Prime Minister of modern times. Ross Kempsell's with us. We're going to take some calls in a moment. Let me just read you a quick couple of tweets so that we can catch a flavour of what people are seeing. Rama says, what a beautiful day. What a lovely weather we're having. What a warm day. What a cool breeze to soothe your body. And best of all, what a day to combine all of this to see the Prime Minister disappear across the horizon of the clouds. Sean says there is no compromise with Brexit. We are either in or we are out. When you have an election or a vote, the losing side doesn't get to set the terms, but they have been doing so since the 23rd of June 2016, and that is the problem. Robert says, don't start feeling sorry for May. She's a Remainer and tried every trick in the book to keep us in the EU. And I guess, Ross, will find out whether that is the truth when a new Tory leader takes over who might be slightly more of a Brexiteer.
Yeah, I mean, the fundamental position on Brexit hasn't changed. The Prime Minister hasn't completed the withdrawal agreement stage. Brexit comes in many stages. The first one is passing the withdrawal agreement. That still remains the position. The European Union and the UK government have formally agreed it, but it has not been ratified by the UK Parliament. So that is the outstanding issue at the top of the new Prime Minister's in-tray in or about the middle of July. A statement in the last few moments from Arlene Foster, the DUP leader. Remember that the DUP are the Tory government's coalition, in effect, coalition partners, in reality, confidence and supply agreement partners. The DUP say, in particular, they commend and thank the Prime Minister for her dutiful approach on national issues and her willingness to recognise Northern Ireland's need for additional resources through the confidence and supply arrangements. So that's thank you very much for all the money. I pay tribute to her selfless service in the interests of the United Kingdom and wish her well for the future. So that is Theresa May's confidence and supply agreement partner wishing her well. We've had a reaction as well from Boris Johnson praising her speech. We've had a reaction from the Chief Whip Julian Smith praising her speech. It is a little bit like that scene in The Thick of It when the Prime Minister resigns and the chief spin doctor comes out into the room and starts shouting, praise her, praise her, praise her, because all of the leadership candidates are keen to be seen in a positive light.
To be doing the right thing.
To be doing the right thing. And there was some briefing from Downing Street in the past few days that the 1922 committee executive were reluctant to be seen to put the boot in. The cabinet were reluctant to be seen to put the boot in. Nobody marched into Downing Street and said, you have to go now. Any cabinet minister could have done that at any point. Sanjay Javid and Jeremy Hunt just asked Theresa May to remove bits of the bill. In the end, she dropped the whole bill, not published today, not being brought forward. That has a huge question mark over it for the new Prime Minister. Top of their in-tray, what to do about the withdrawal agreement, which has not been passed in Parliament. Exactly the same numbers, exactly the same position on Brexit will be inherited by whoever comes out of that Tory leadership contest in the middle of July.
Well, this is what I was saying earlier. Nothing has actually really changed in terms of what is going on inside the chamber. Let's talk to Neil, who's in Macclesfield. Hi, Neil.
Hi, Mike. You all right?
Yeah, very well indeed. Very well. It's quite an interesting day, shall we say.
It's a wonderful, wonderful day. A new dawn. Good riddance to bad rubbish, that's what I say. She was an absolutely appalling Prime Minister, and the only thing she'll be remembered for is the destruction of the Conservative Party.
That's a good question, actually, because will it be able to reconstitute itself?
I mean, we won't really know the damage that she's done until Monday morning, and then we'll be able to find out exactly what the mood of the country is, and what people actually really think about the government that we've got. So I think looking into the distance with this talk about the general election, I think we're going to be forced into a situation where do we want a Corbyn Marxist government and no Brexit, or do we want Brexit and conservative values?
It's a very fascinating day, Neil. Thank you very much indeed. Neil does not have any time for Theresa May, never has had, feels that her legacy is in fact the destruction of the Tory party. Can the Tory party survive? Could it survive, or has it already been killed off by Theresa May? 0344 499 1000. Tweet us at Talk Radio. We've got loads coming up. Mark Francois is going to be joining us. Coming up next, we're going to be talking to Mark Francois, amongst others, lots and lots of MPs, lots of other Tories and Labour members of Parliament, of course. Also got a great tweet here from Jim, who says, Theresa May claiming her legacy was giving a voice to the voiceless, as if she's Nelson Mandela or someone. Well, it does seem a little bit over the top. I will say, though, the tears that she shed and was clearly about to shed massively as she walked away from the podium outside of Downing Street were very genuine, very heartfelt, because this is her life, and this is now the end of her political life, it would seem. She's got 2 more weeks in Downing Street, and then that's it. I mean, no doubt she'll be elevated to the House of Lords at some point, but there is nothing worse than going from being the top dog, whether you're not doing a very good job or not, and finding yourself on the backbenches of Parliament. Let's talk to Mark Francois, who is, of course, Vice Chair of the European Research Group. Mark has been, I would say, campaigning for a harder Brexit all the way through. All of the meaningful votes that Theresa May has had has not been something that he has gone along with. Mark, a very good morning to you. Welcome. Thank you for
good morning.
Taking the time to talk to us. This is a very momentous day, of course, not only for Theresa May and the Tory party, but for the country as well. The big question I'm being asked by lots of people is, can anyone get us out of Europe?
I believe so. I think what is going to be different is, I believe, when the Conservative Party picks a new leader, and it's ultimately a decision for our party members in the country, but I believe they're almost overwhelmingly likely to pick a Brexiteer, and that's a fundamental change, because we can leave on the 31st of October. That's the default position. We don't need any other legislation to do it. We don't need the withdrawal agreement. And if we have a Prime Minister and a Cabinet that really believe in leaving, that is a game changer.
And do you think the right candidate, though, with the right kind of ideas on Brexit, will have enough support from everybody else? Because the mathematics hasn't really changed. If anything, the Tory party is less powerful than it was when Theresa May started this process. And in many ways, the Brexit argument is more fractured.
Well, I think, and I'm going to make a sort of prediction here, but I could be wrong. The people have voted in the European elections. Those votes are now locked up in the ballot boxes, and we start opening them on Sunday when the rest of Europe finish voting. So whatever I say now won't change the votes in the ballot boxes, but I believe it will be a complete tsunami. It's going to be a tidal wave. And I think that would change the attitude of some members of Parliament in the House of Commons, who up to this point have very blatantly been doing everything they can to frustrate Brexit. I think one of the lessons of these results when we get them are going to be that MPs that carry on like that will be swept away. So I think that may change attitudes sufficiently that MPs stop resisting Brexit in the House of Commons. Now, legally, the default position is that we can leave on the 31st of October without any other legislation at all. The only thing legally that can stop that now is either A, if we ask the EU for a further extension, because they can't extend against our will. And if we don't do that, then the only other thing that can stop it is an act of Parliament to override it. The so-called Cooper-Bowles-Letwin bill that was designed to stop Brexit only got through last time literally by one vote. So I think after the European election results, it will be very difficult for the ardent Remainers in Parliament to get such an act of Parliament through to stop Brexit against the will of the people. And therefore, I think there's if we pick the critical thing is to pick a leader who really believes in leaving in their heart and soul. And if they do that and appoint a cabinet, that believe in leaving, then I think there's now a better than 50% chance we can leave on Halloween.
Now, given your opposition to Theresa May and her version of Brexit, would you consider yourself to be the architect of her downfall?
No, I think, if I'm honest, she was the architect of her downfall. Because, it's true, I've been a persistent critic. I can't now be a hypocrite and say I wasn't. I was. But, when I wrote my first letter to Sir Graham Brady, and I published it so people knew what I'd done, I entitled it, "She Just Doesn't Listen." And I'm afraid, that may turn out to be her epitaph, because all the way through this process, she hasn't listened to her own party. And that, unfortunately, is what's led to the events of today. It is, on one level, tragic, but it had to happen because she was trying to pursue a policy, effectively, of keeping us in the European Union against the will of her party and of the people.
And would you say that you're proud to have been part of that movement that has now perhaps taken back control of the party for those who want to leave the European Union properly?
Well, I think it's fair to say that whatever people think of me, I've now my colours to the mast on this one. I think I've been hopefully consistent throughout. I've always believed we had to honour the result of the referendum, and I've campaigned pretty tirelessly to that end. So, when we do leave the European Union, when we do honour the result of the referendum, when we do democratically obey the order that the people who elect us as MPs gave us to carry out on their behalf, then I will celebrate the fact that we've left the EU.
Will you celebrate tonight that Theresa May's out of Downing Street, or do you have any sympathy for her? She was clearly very upset.
Look, as I say, it is a tragic situation. But having called for her so publicly to go, I can't now pretend that I didn't. So do I regret her going? No. I believe she had to go, and I believe ultimately she brought it upon herself. Do I realise that this is a very sad occasion? Yes, I do.
And who will you back for leader next?
I genuinely have not decided. I haven't decided who I'm going to cast my vote for. I mean, the best summary today, I think, was Robert Halfon, my great mate, the MP for Harlow, who was asked on the Today programme, when we get to the leadership, Robert, what's it going to be like? And he said it'll be like the chariot race scene in Ben-Hur. There'll be a cast of thousands.
Yeah, there'll be a bit of death as well, I imagine.
Well, we can argue over who is Marcellus.
We can, yeah.
The important thing is whoever wins, because it will ultimately go to our party members, I believe they will pick a Brexiteer, but I don't know which one. But the important thing for the unity of our party, and indeed for the direction of the country, is that whoever that person is, they have the support of the ordinary members of the Conservative Party, so that they can turn around to all Tory MPs, whether they voted for them or not, and say, I know not everybody, not all of you voted for me, but I do have the support of the party members, so you must at least give me a chance to lead. And I think that's a reasonable ask, isn't it?
It is. And Jeremy Corbyn, finally, Mark, has said that when the new Tory leader is appointed, there should be a general election. Do you agree with him?
Well, no, not necessarily. But I mean, if the Queen appoints the new leader as Prime Minister, then I suspect, the Labour Party will test their authority with a vote of confidence in the House of Commons. Now, if that new Prime Minister wins a vote of confidence, and we would, of course, need the support of our DUP allies to do that, I realise that, then I think they should be given a chance, to form a government and to focus on leading us out of the European Union. If Parliament continues to try and frustrate that, then you might have to have a general election to settle the matter. But I hope for the reasons I've explained earlier, I hope clearly to your listeners, I think we can leave on Halloween without having to have a general election.
OK. Mark, thanks very much indeed. Tory MP Mark Francois, Vice Chair of the ERG. We're going to go to the calls in a moment. Loads of you want to get on. You will get on. 0344 499 1000. Ross Kempsell's here with me. Ross, what did you make of what Mark had to say? Fairly fair, I think, in his assessment of what happened. He has, of course, got to acknowledge that he has been anti-Theresa May from the beginning. But she did bring it on herself.
Many MPs have been. Many MPs have been publicly critical of the Prime Minister for many, many months, and a key part of the kind of political roadmap that led us to today's resignation, or today's resignation promise or statement, is simply that the Prime Minister has been out of control of her own party, out of control of her own cabinet. She has not been able to engender message discipline for MPs for months, really, and it started with a series of high-profile cabinet walkouts. Boris Johnson, Dominic Raab, many other high-profile resignations. The Prime Minister has suffered, I think, 36 ministerial resignations this year.
I was going to say, it's up around about 40, isn't it, since the beginning?
Yeah, an extraordinarily high number for any Prime Minister, even one dealing with such a challenging policy issue. Of course, untested in the history of kind of modern British politics, having to deal with something like this. I think you could make an argument, but at the same time, an extraordinary rate at which to be hemorrhaging government ministers. Clearly a government which was never, as promised, strong and stable, which since the 2017 general election, although warned against a coalition of chaos, turned out to be chaos itself on many, many occasions. And we've sat opposite each other many times on days where the government has seemed to be in disarray. I've lost count of the number of times where I've sat here and thought, goodness, I just do not know how we are operating on an hour-by-hour basis. And Theresa May, even in her resignation, even, promise of resignation, even then we were operating on a timescale of Theresa May's in a room with her husband making the decision, and even her senior advisors don't know. That was the position last night. It's become a sign of just how insular the top of Downing Street has become, that even those who have given sort of their right arm for Theresa May professionally didn't have an idea of what she was going to say until she came and said it this morning.
And senior ministers couldn't even get in to see her. Let's go to the phones. Malcolm is in Oxford. Hello, Malcolm.
Hello there, Mike. How you doing?
Yeah, very well indeed. What would you like to say?
Well, I'd just like to say that I don't feel at all sorry for Theresa May, our Prime Minister. I listened to her speech on the steps of Downing Street. I thought she was sounded very pathetic, personally.
Really? You didn't have any sort of shred of sympathy?
None whatsoever,
no,
because she is an architect of her own downfall.
What do you think she should have done?
What she should have done was stuck to her original plan. And I wouldn't say she compromised. I would say she sold this country down the river, sold us out.
Do you feel as though her negotiations were just a bit of a sham, really?
I wouldn't even call them negotiations. When you undermine two of your Brexit secretaries, questions have to be asked.
Yeah. You do wonder. I mean, I'd like to say that I think she was misguided rather than deliberately kind of conspiratorial, because I don't think she's been that cynical to try to keep us in the best way that she could, while pretending all the while that she was leaving. I think she just tied herself up in knots, to be honest.
Well, you can't bat for both sides.
No.
It's as simple as that. I was a lifetime Labour voter.
Okay.
In 2017, I switched to the Conservative Party because I was misled by Theresa May saying she was strong and stable. I was actually on one of the Conservative election leaflets in the constituency that I'm in. And I've never felt so let down by a politician as I have been by Theresa May.
Yeah, it's an interesting
because
point of view.
She is far from strong and stable.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would share that view, Malcolm. Thank you very much indeed for sharing it with us. Let's talk to John Whittingdale, Conservative MP for Malden, former Minister himself. John, very good morning. Good afternoon, I should say to you.
Good afternoon.
A sad day for you, or one to celebrate a new beginning?
Well, I mean, I think one inevitably feels a certain degree of sympathy. I can remember working with Margaret Thatcher, and I was with her when she walked out of Downing Street to make a statement to say that she accepted she no longer had the confidence of all of her colleagues and therefore had decided to resign. And of course she sort of became very emotional at the end, and we saw the same thing happen today with Theresa May. It is obviously an emotional experience, and one can't help feeling some human sympathy for her, but I have to say that I think it is right that the Conservative Party now looks for a new leader, and that's something which I have been calling for some time now.
Quite. And, I mean, surprisingly emotional from Theresa May. Obviously, this has been her life. I mean, what happens now to a Prime Minister who has to now more or less kind of disappear into the shadows? She's obviously disappointed that her legacy is not a great one. Where does she go from here?
Well, I think that is a challenge. I mean, of course, in the case of Margaret Thatcher, it was entirely her life, and she found it quite empty afterwards, although she continued to do a lot of international work, making speeches, writing books, having meetings. I think it's probably harder for Theresa May. She doesn't have the record that Margaret Thatcher had of 11 years and 3 election victories. in David Cameron's case, I mean, he's gone off and really tried to discover other things which he hasn't been able to do whilst he was in politics. So he's rather left the scene. I suspect in Theresa May's case, the latter is more likely. I don't see a political role for her particularly, but that's something which we'll have to wait and see.
Indeed. A lot of our callers, many of whom say they are Conservative Party members, have accused Theresa May of not only failing to deliver Brexit, but of destroying or partially destroying the Tory party. Can it be rebuilt?
Well, I mean, I have to say, I think there is a huge challenge, and we will discover perhaps the scale of that challenge on Sunday night when, obviously, we will learn the result of the European elections, which none of us think are going to be good. But one of the reasons why I signed the letter to Graham Brady last year was because I felt that the Conservative Party was in real danger if we continued down this track. We did so, and here we are now, sort of 5 months later, and we're in a much worse position. But of course it's salvageable, but I think it needs a fresh leader and a fresh approach.
And do you have any particular leaders in mind? It sounds like it's going to be a very long and protracted race because of so many people wanting to try and grasp the crown.
I hope it is not long and protracted. I hope it is dealt with as quickly as possible. I'm supporting Boris Johnson on the basis that, firstly, he believes in Brexit, he campaigned for it, and I think part of the problem is that Theresa May has not been somebody who believed in Brexit. She sort of sees it as a damage limitation exercise when she talks about delivering it, rather than grasping the opportunities, whereas Boris obviously was one of the leading campaigners at the time of the referendum, but also because, as we've seen in London, during his 2 victories in the mayoral elections, he is somebody who can win, and I think he has an appeal going outside of Conservative members to the country, and that is tremendously important if we are to win another general election.
And what does Boris's leadership do to the inner workings and the kind of voting intentions, if you like, of the Parliamentary Conservative Party, which is, let's face it, pretty split in various different ways?
We're going to have, I'm sure, a lively campaign. I think, at the moment, obviously, there are a huge number of people who seem to be intending to stand. I think most of them will sort of use it to put down a marker for the future. I think there are probably only 3 or 4 serious candidates, but we'll wait and see. But once the decision is taken, I think there will be a recognition right across the party that once a new leader is selected, then it is for all of us to support him or her and try and take the party forward.
But what about the Remainers in the party? What will their reaction be to somebody who is quite firm, and has been quite firm before, on possibly leaving without a deal?
Well, bear in mind that, I think everybody in the Conservative Party has said that they accepted the result of the referendum, and that is what we are now going to try and deliver. And there are those who take a different view to me also found it a lot of them could not support the Prime Minister's deal. In fact, it was one thing that united both wings was that the Prime Minister's deal was not the way forward. So I hope that we can now find an alternative which can command support. And I would point you that the one time when Parliament did achieve a majority was the Brady Amendment, which was to take out the backstop so that we wouldn't be trapped in a customs union. I want to see a free trade agreement, probably the most comprehensive, the most far-reaching that the European Union has ever signed, and that's something which they have said they would like to do as well.
And how would you get all of that through Parliament? Because at the moment, the impasse seems to be provided by the fact that nobody can agree, or not a majority of people can't agree on any one thing.
Well, no, what couldn't get through Parliament was the Prime Minister's deal, and that is because it was deeply flawed, and if anything, the numbers concerned about it went up. I think that there is a way forward. As I say, the Brady Amendment showed that the majority does exist if it can be mustered. And I think that, if we can get an agreement and then an outline of a free trade agreement, which will take time to reach, but in my view, we do have to deliver Brexit now. That is going to be the message which comes clearly from the European elections. We've now got another date, 31st of October. We can't allow it to be put back again.
And is there any point in her hanging around for long enough to sort of greet and meet and greet Donald Trump on his state visit? I mean, I know that protocol might suggest that that's the best way to do it, but it all seems a bit hollow, doesn't it?
She is the Prime Minister until a new Prime Minister
Well, not
is
really.
elected.
I mean, she's pretty much not the Prime Minister now.
Sorry?
I mean, isn't she pretty much not the Prime Minister? She just resigned.
She is still the Prime Minister until somebody takes over. The country has to have a Prime Minister and a government in order to function. And Donald Trump is coming, and as the Prime Minister, she will, I'm sure, meet him and have talks with him. But we won't have the new Prime Minister in place before that time, so clearly she...
Yeah, but isn't that a bit of a missed opportunity? I mean, here we have the Prime Minister meets the President of the United States of America, our biggest and strongest ally, hoping to become an even bigger and more strong ally post-Brexit, and yet the person he's talking to is not going to be around.
Well, I mean, that's just a consequence of the timing, but I'm sure he won't just talk to Theresa May. I mean, I'm sure he'll talk to others who are in the, potentially going to become the Prime Minister in due course once the election has taken place.
Okay.
And this is, the relationship between Britain and the UK and the US is very close, and I'm sure that whoever succeeds Theresa May will have regular conversations with Donald Trump, just as she has done.
No, indeed. I just think it would be more helpful if it was the person that was actually going to be in charge. But I know that timing is not everything.
I think that the visit is to some extent going to be more ceremonial. Obviously, he will be seeing Her Majesty the Queen, which I'm sure is probably the highlight for him of the visit. Theresa May is somebody who he sees quite often at summits, international conferences, etc., and I'm sure that will remain the case with whoever takes over.
Let's go to the phones, though. John, first of all, is in Brighton. Hello, John.
Sir.
Yeah,
well,
hi.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for calling. What's up?
Yeah, I just want to say about, obviously, Mrs May. Look, I have got absolutely no sorrow at all that she's resigned.
Okay.
She's had these crocodile tears. Did she have any tears for the people who've lost their jobs in the steel industry because her government wouldn't bail them out, and yet they bailed out the bankers? Has she got any tears for the people of Britain that suffered austerity for all these years, and yet the bankers and also the city haven't suffered at all? Has she got any sympathy of tears for the people that she's wrecked in the NHS and destroying all the public services? And so people are having to pay twice for what they should have only to pay once for in their taxes and insurance. I'm sorry, I think this has all been about, I'm afraid, the own particular Tory party and what they call the IG group sorting things out for themselves. Now, it is not democratic that we should have a situation where now we have got actually two leaders that will be chosen to be Prime Minister by the Tory party. We need a general election, firstly. As far as just quickly about Brexit's concerned, I voted to stay, but I'm a Democrat. We leave, and we should have left. If there was no deal done, we should have left with WTO terms.
Do you think we should have... John, do you think we should have a general election before October the 31st, which is the date at which we're supposed to leave one way or the other?
I think. Well, the situation will be this. I think if for example, if say Boris Johnson gets elected to be obviously the Tory leader, he will become Prime Minister. He is obviously a Brexiteer. Now, he will go for a no deal anyway, I suspect, because he doesn't want a situation where we have negotiated certain things about workers' rights and everything else with the EEC. It's in his interest to get us to go to a WTO rules. But why wait till October the 31st? What we should have is, yes, let the Tories get their election done, get their leaders sorted out, whoever they want, and then as soon as whoever that is, we call a general election, and let's have the people decide. Now, personally, I think the Tory party's finished. I think they've been split so badly with the likes of Brexit, and those who are Brexiteers are ones that are not. That's why Mrs May couldn't actually get anything through. She's had help, obviously, from the DUP, who were given a lot of money just because of the fact they were supporting the Tory party. Now, I wonder would that actually have happened the same if it was any other party? I very much doubt it.
No, I think you're absolutely right. No, listen, but the other problem for people who are against having a general election is that they say all that would happen now, particularly because Brexit is such a divisive issue, is that we would have another hung parliament, even if it was won by Jeremy Corbyn or the Tories. Whoever won it, it would be another minority government, which unfortunately doesn't seem to work.
Well, I'm afraid we all said about the fact that years ago that we wanted to have a non-two-party system. I must say now we're starting to get that. Now I'm afraid, and I'm not necessarily agreeing that we should have one or not, but the point is, I always look at the example of Italy. Italy have had minority governments for the last 13, 14 periods of time.
We used to make fun of Italy.
Well, exactly, but here we are again. We're Britain. I'm sorry, we're Britain. I respect everybody else, but the point is we should have leaders who are accountable to the country. I'm sorry, and I'm saying this, Mrs. May, and I'm not having a personal go at her, but her husband owns a hedge fund of, 12 billion he owns? Is he anything or her anything to do with the ordinary working class person in this country? No. And that is the problem we've got in this country. People who basically make the wealth in this country, and I know they say, it's always the managers and the bosses do it. It's the actual workers who put the graft in. Now, we're the ones that produce the profit. We're the ones that pay our taxes, unlike some of the upper class who do not pay their taxes.
Well, now you've just turned it into some kind of mad communist rant, John. The bottom line is that actually the City of London pays the bulk of taxes in this country and provides most of the income for the government in this country. So don't give me that old cobblers for a start. Let's talk to Stewart Jackson, former MP, former special advisor as well to David Davis. Stewart, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome.
Hi, Mike.
I was going along with John there for a while, but then he started on the old, the rich don't pay their taxes and all that. So make no mistake, I will always call that out as a load of old rubbish. But where are we today and why is it going to be any different, whoever gets into Downing Street and whoever gets re-elected, or elected, I should say, appointed as the next Tory leader? Nothing's going to change, is it?
Well, quite possibly not, but at least it gives us a chance for a new leader to actually adhere to what we, after all, were elected on. The Conservative Party got 42% of the general election. Many people who'd never voted Conservative before in the north of England, in the Midlands, in South Wales, trusted us to deliver Brexit. And we keep being told Parliament's going to stop no deal, as if Parliament can just ignore that mandate. The mandate they have is to deliver Brexit. Now, I was foursquare with Theresa May right up until Chequers, when it was evident that she'd been got at by the establishment, by the multinationals, by the Europhiles in her cabinet, and she veered dangerously off, pushing a Brexit in name only. And that's why eventually she had to leave, because she was not adhering to the mandate. And I think at least with a Boris or a Dominic Raab, you will have an authentic Brexit. And they'll be able to go back to the Commission and say, look, we have alternative solutions on the Northern Ireland border. We have the Morehouse Compromise. You change the withdrawal agreement in respect to Northern Ireland, and we're going to the races. We can get a deal. We can remain friends. Otherwise, we will have to leave on no deal, and it will be your responsibility.
And are you confident that whoever is the new leader will do that and will actually take it to the wire and will say, we'll be quite happy to leave without a deal?
Well, look, when we have the results from the European elections on Sunday evening, they are most likely to show that the Conservative Party will have polled the worst popular vote in any national election in close on 200 years. We may get low single figures MEPs, we may get none. There is an existential threat to the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. And frankly, you can't cock a snook at 17 million people and say, thanks for your feedback, but we'll take it from here and we'll decide to mediate your decision and really not leave at all. You can't do it. We're not a banana republic. And as that previous caller, before he went on his Corbynite rant, actually said, we are a country that respects democracy and the decision of the people. And I think that we have got a chance now to reboot. A new leader will clear out Downing Street from some of the Europhiles. I think, obviously, Ollie Robbins should be fired. He has not pursued mainly because he was given too much of a lead by the Prime Minister, in fairness, because he is a civil servant. He's not pursued, in my opinion, Britain's long-term national interests. And I think we put the ball in the court of the EU and say, you've played a game for 2 years. This is serious business. We're a big economy, big, important country. Let's do business. And if you're not prepared to do that, we will go to WTO and no deal.
Are you surprised, Stewart, that nobody else this morning has followed suit after Theresa May's resignation and resigned? Because I'm getting tweets from some people saying basically no one who is in the current cabinet with Theresa May should be allowed to stand as leader because they are just as culpable and just as guilty for having messed it all up.
I think you put your finger absolutely on the spot, Mike. At the end of the day, whatever you say about Esther McVeigh, about Dominic Raab, about David Davis and about Boris Johnson, they observed the proper propriety that they could not go along with the collective decision of the Cabinet and they resigned. Unlike people like David Gauke, Greg Clark, Amber Rudd, who were quite happy to sabotage the government's policy, force no deal off the table and stay in the Cabinet with their red boxes and their civil servants and their speeches and all that and the trappings of office.
And the extra money.
And the extra money. And I actually think that the position of people like Liam Fox and Penny Mordaunt, I'm afraid, is untenable because, they accepted Chequers, they accepted the withdrawal agreement, they even accepted this terrible Versailles Treaty withdrawal bill that the Prime Minister brought forward earlier this week, which was her undoing. I just think their judgment is massively called into question, and therefore I don't think, frankly, that they are the right people to be in the running to be leader of our party. And because it's not business as usual. It is an existential threat to the very future of our party.
And have you picked somebody to back yet, or are you holding your keeping your powder dry on that?
I will be supporting Boris Johnson. We know Boris is not perfect. Boris is not everyone's cup of tea, but he's got that Ronald Reagan style cheerfulness, charisma. He's got a positive, forward-looking approach. And let's be honest, Mike, we need a bit of cheering up. And Boris can campaign. And frankly, he's the only one that can stop the catastrophe of a Jeremy Corbyn government.
If you need cheering up, by the way, Stewart, you should listen to this radio station more because we have a lot of fun here. Don't listen to the pale imitations anywhere else where they're all doom and gloom all the time.
Well, I was just thinking this morning, a particular well-known morning presenter on LBC.
Yes.
Once Boris Johnson becomes leader of the Conservative Party, I think his head will probably explode.
Yeah, it'll be like that movie Scanners, won't it?
We know who we're talking about, don't we, Mike?
Yeah, we don't mention his name here. It's not allowed to be mentioned, otherwise we have to cut you off immediately. Stewart, as ever, thank you very much indeed. Stewart Jackson, former Special Advisor with David Davis, former MP, of course, as well. A couple of you agree with me about the Trump thing. Steve says, so the leader of the most powerful country on earth will visit this country and meet with a caretaker. John says, you're dead right, Mike. A golden opportunity for the new Prime Minister to meet the most powerful man on the planet. But, of course, instead, the man we want to make the big deals with will meet the old Prime Minister, a dodo, a Prime Minister with zero power, no influence, balmy, a lost opportunity. Well, of course it is. Let's talk to Paul in Poole. Hello, Paul in Poole.
How you doing, mate?
Yeah, right? Very well indeed. What do you want to say, man?
I just can't see any way out of this, to be honest with you, Mike. I mean, I've listened all morning to, obviously, the press conference and what Theresa had to say. First and foremost, I think she took on a poison chalice anyway.
Yeah.
And fair play to her, because where she give it a go, people like David Davis and Cameron, they didn't want nothing to do with it and they ran to the hills. But it's a fanatical wish, if anything else, because I think if whoever goes in, whoever gets the premiership with the Tory party, I think it's going to be divided regardless, and I just can't see it going any further forward.
I've been asking that. I've been asking that question, Paul, because the mathematics in the House of Commons are the same. We are still presented with effectively a Remainer Parliament, despite the fact that the people have voted to leave the European Union, and none of that has changed.
No, not at all. And if they call for a general election, I can't see Labour getting in under Corbyn, and if they do, God help us. So. Where do we stand? I mean, if I close my eyes and I had one wish, I would like Nigel Farage to be some part of some kind of government, maybe formed with other pro-Brexit.
Well, I said a long time.
And...
I remember saying a long time ago, should we not be looking for, at least while we negotiate and while we try to leave the European Union, a government made up of people who want to leave the European Union, people who will actually force it through, and a parliament that will then do what they're told.
Absolutely, and of course, going back to politicians in general. I mean, we're all aware that a lot of politicians have been career politicians from certain backgrounds, be it private school or what have you. There is other working class people within other parties that's had a little bit of a background of the real world. But again, going back to Farage, at least he's been in business prior to this, and maybe get some businessmen in that they can use as advisors, because at the end of the day, the government is a business, the country is a business. It's all about the best for the country. So why not get some fine minds in and get them to assist, just get us out of this mess.
No, I absolutely agree, Paul. Very, very good call, and I think you speak for an awful lot of people who are still very frustrated. The fact that Theresa May has left and has announced that she's going, even though she's not going for 2 weeks, is a massive breakthrough, you'd have to say, for those of us who have been frustrated by her attempts to leave, her ham-fisted attempts to leave the European Union. However, we do need to make sure that this is a watershed moment, not that we just carry on with a different individual in charge doing the same old thing. It has to change.